Okay, class. Today we're going to talk about portraits and what exactly portraits are. Portraits are typically of a person, or they can be of a pet, animal, whatnot, and hopefully in the picture of the person it describes a little bit of their personality, whether it's something they're holding or the way they're looking or what style you use to do the portrait. Um, there's all kinds of old-fashioned pictures. Here's one. It's a Renaissance type portrait, but that is of a person. That is what we're talking about, portraits. They can be any medium. They can be sculptural, they can be two-dimensional. There's, statues, there's paintings, pictures, drawings. By pictures, I mean photographs. So, some of the types of art forms that can be used to portray portraits would be, one of them would be a pop art type. And pop art was a 20th century art movement that was about using commercialism and consumerism. Some of you might have heard of Andy Warhol. He did that. But also, so it was big in the 60s. People still use it today. A lot of, like, if you look at graffiti artists, like Banksy, sometimes they'll use that. It's very commercialized pictures in their work. Not necessarily portraiture, but it gives you an idea of what the work looks like. So some of a portrait by Liechtenstein, which he used dots, as in he was very, like, kind of did the comic book style of portraiture and advertisement style, and that's why we've got this mirror and a t-shirt with the graphic lines. Very simple, very graphic. We've got another one that's a bunch of pictures put together by David Hockney. These, it looks like one big picture cut apart, but they're actually a bunch of little pictures of him. They're all slightly different. And then we've got, this is a little bit different because it's of the back of the gentleman. So this is still a portrait because it's of a person, even though it's of their back. And then here's we go, Andy Warhol. A lot of people know who he is, but this is a couple of pictures he did, Marilyn Monroe and Chairman Mao. And this is very commercialized and very graphic. He uses a lot of bright, bold colors and simple palettes. Now, Cubism is a different kind of style, and it was begun by Pablo Picasso, who was actually Spanish, if y'all didn't know that, and then a Frenchman named Georges Braque. Cubism, it's geometric. It's exactly what it sounds like. You break the subject up into geometric pieces and you can put them back together. One such example is a portrait of Salvador Dali. You can see barely a face right there, but it is still a portrait. Even though it's really abstract portrait, it's still a portrait. And then we've got Picasso, his portrait of a weeping woman, and this is easier to see. It's definitely a person, but it's still very abstract, but it's still a portrait. Okay. And here's a portrait of Picasso done by another painter named Juan Gris. So this is a portrait of Picasso in Cubism, which is a medium Picasso, a style Picasso used. Okay. The next style we're going to look at, it's also a painting style. It was called Fauvism. And Fauvism was a French word for wild beasts. It was because they thought that the painting style was very violent and very... it had a lot of very rich colors, and the French just thought it was very violent, and so they named it Fauve. And the guy in charge of that was Henri Matisse. He was a Frenchman, so he used wild brush strokes, vivid, non-naturalistic, contrasting colors, and it abstracted the subject. So it's another abstract style, but as you can see, actually this one's beautiful, I love this one. very bright, vivid colors. Not realistic, but it is a portrait. As is this one of Matisse's wife. It's simple, simplified, and it's a nice portrait, but it's got a lot of action going on with the brush strokes, and it's got a lot of color in it. It's really, you can tell this is not, who would have this orange piece as opposed to these blue pieces over here behind her. Really not usual. And, she wouldn't typically have a green stripe down her nose. This is also a good one of a lady with a very big hat. All portraits. And there's also the style of realism. And realism, it was kind of depressing, actually. Realism typically involved, it was socio-political, and it wanted to do a moral message. Like this one here had people working out in the fields. But that's a very realistic picture. It's still a portrait. It's a portrait of them doing their jobs. They're out in the field doing what they need to do with the... Oh, I'm so far. Alright, next. So we've got another picture of a couple here with a parrot. So this is a portrait, this is a painted portrait of this couple in a realistic style. And you can see here there's a parrot with them. So this is what I mean by, you can do it of pets. Portraits can be of pets. It could have been just the parrot, but it was of the three subjects. It's got the man, the woman, and the parrot. But it's realistic, not just in the style that they're painted, but also in the background and where they are in their home, probably. And this one is a little harder to see, but it's still classified as realism. And it's a portrait of an artist smoking a pipe. This one is a little gruesome, but it's very realistic. This is a very realistic painting called The Gross Clinic, and it's of it's of a dissection of a person. It doesn't really show that person, but that is the portrait of basically an anatomy class with a cadaver. But it's still a portrait, even though it's of several different subjects. It's a real situation, but it's still a portrait. Now, another style we're going to talk about would be the Impressionism style, which I think looks a lot like the Fauvism style, but it differs in subtle ways. They're shorter strokes, and it's a lighter palette. It's not as bright a palette of colors that they use, but this is another painting style. And they did candid shots, basically, of people just kind of sitting there, and not as much posed, even though with a painting you really do have to pose it. So this is one by Claude Monet. It's of a girl sitting on a bench with her umbrella leaning against the bench. And this is a girl with a watering can by an artist called Renoir. And I believe Degas was also. And this is one of a little girl and her nanny. But see, you can do short strokes, and it's a much milder tone to the palette. It's much more kind of a pastel tone. And here's a self-portrait from Renoir himself. So that's a self-portrait, which usually he would sit on a stool and look at himself in the mirror and just continually paint himself. So all these are portraits, whether it's of just the artists themselves, whether it's of other people. It can be a portrait of pets. It can be pretty much anything that is living. Can be a portrait, and So what I want you to do is I want you to think about what style of portrait you would like to do. Even if you would like to do a self-portrait, take a picture of yourself. You can take that photograph. You can even use your cell phones. We'll turn that in for a grade, but I want it to be a little bit different. I want it to just be a self-snap. No self-snaps. If you're going to do that and turn it in, I want you to put an effect on it, to stylize it in a way to work with it, not just make it something very simple. Or, we can do whatever style you choose. We can do pictures, we can do paintings, we can do drawings, we can do some sculptures, we can do either clay sculptures, we can try an armature and build your sculpture around that. And like I said before, these can be abstract. They don't have to be realistic. I want you to put some personality into this portrait. Okay? So think about that, and we'll go on the class and see where we are. Thank you.